but they say everybody wants to pilot the AI aeroplane into the future. But they forget that a plane might have two pilots, but it's got 50 ground staff who are refueling, making sure that the plane can get, reverse out of the parking bay, the air traffic controllers. And so you're wanting to fly to a new destination without doing the hard work of building the airport infrastructure. Welcome to the Elephants in the Boardroom podcast. My name is Graeme Codrington. I am in sunny Bahrain today, and as always, joined by my colleague Dean Van Leeuwen.
Hi everyone, Dean Van Leeuwen, just south of London, in what was a sweltering West Sussex, but thankfully the temperatures have subsided a little bit.
Well, Dean, I was going to ask you what you've seen in the world recently, but I'm going to jump in because that's what I've seen. Looking up from the southern hemisphere, where we're enjoying a bit of a crisp, cold winter, it looks like you guys have been melting across Europe. And my one of my adult daughters came to visit last week, and when she comes, she likes to use my car to get herself around. Uber's not obviously good enough for her, and we always have a bit of an argument. Hannah likes the car a little bit cooler. I like it a little bit warmer. And so, whenever each of us get into the car after the other one has driven in it, we have to adjust the climate control. And Hannah will argue that I have a sweltering heat on, and I argue that she's got a fridge. But here's the point, Dean. She likes it at 21 degrees Celsius, and I like it at 23. And it's literally that 2 degrees that makes a difference. I think 21 is cold. She thinks 23 is hot. We're probably both right, actually. And it just reminded me that 2 degrees Celsius is actually significant.
Mm.
When you hit that key point, it's the difference between feeling cold and feeling warm. And that's why the climate scientists for many years have been saying 1.5 degrees of average temperature increase is going to be significant. It is. We feel it in our cars. So when Europe has a June of 2026 that is 4 to 5 degrees warmer than average and breaks all record temperatures for June in recorded history, we're talking something like serious here. This is not just a little thing, and the climate scientists, those who are not freaking out or haven't been freaking out, really are freaking out now. Obviously, it will go down as probably an aberration. Next year might not be quite as much. But what I'm seeing, Dean, is that, the people who've been saying that extreme weather brought on by global warming is the new normal, well, they're right. And we are certainly experiencing it in the world right now. You guys in the Northern Hemisphere have certainly experienced it in June. I don't know what more needs to be said because this impacts everything from logistics. It makes it more difficult to travel. It impacts agriculture because it is just at the season where plants do not need that level of heat. And that's not to talk about the fact that it impacts us literally in the way that we live, with people literally dying because of the heat and not being able to do what we normally do in our lives. So if schools have closed, railway tracks have melted in Germany. I mean, it really just is something that we now need to realize it's happening. It's here to stay. We need to move into mitigation phase, but also we can't just say we give up. 2 degrees is bad, 4 degrees is even worse, and 5 degrees is catastrophic. So,
Mm.
anyway, a warning from Mother Nature about, I think, what's to come over the next few years and decades.
Yeah, it's a sobering thought, Graham. My boy spent Thursday and Friday. Schools were closed, so he stayed home. You do start to melt yourself. Your brain starts to melt. You're unable to work, and especially in the UK where we were geared up for colder climates, cooler climate.
Yeah.
double glazed windows, and they don't work when it's 40 degrees outside. Actually, they work in the opposite way.
Yes.
Uh, so yeah, in the UK, we're going to have to start thinking, as you say, it's mitigation. It's how do we learn to live with climate change? But let's don't make that a fool's paradise, because, as you say, when it gets to 4 degrees, 5 degrees, it's a serious shift.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, quite sobering, quite
And
sobering.
if people wanted more of a reason to take it seriously, and I am going to be slightly flippant, but not really, uh, those of us who enjoy football are hating these hydration breaks. Now, I know that the Fox Sports guys put it in America to get in that extra advertising revenue and turn a game of two halves into a game of four quarters with advertising breaks. Yeah, let's not talk about that at all. I'm still incensed every game I watch. But if the temperatures are high, you're
Mm.
going to have to do that. So if you want to know, is it going to affect every part of our lives? The answer is yes, including the sports that we love and how we play those. But that's what I've seen. I think fairly obvious one this month. What's on your radar at the moment, Dean?
Oh, Graham, that's why I always enjoy these conversations. They really give us a chance to pause, look up from the noise, and ask what's really going on in the world of work and business and leadership. Today, as a conversation, what I want to share with you is something I've been thinking about a lot since a recent trip to Nashville. And it's given me one of these, you know, small but very real glimpses, I think, into the future. My elephant in the boardroom for this episode is, we are using one of the most powerful tools humanity has ever created to advance human ability. And yet, much of the business conversation about AI is still trapped in a narrow language around cost savings, efficiency, automation, and even replacing people. And I feel, certainly after the experience I had in Nashville, I feel it's the wrong conversation to be having, because the real opportunity is to use AI to advance intelligence, human judgment, human capability. And I saw this in a very real way in Nashville. So I was there presenting a keynote on thriving in a banny world to a client in the TV and the cable industry. And while there, I discovered that Waymo, the self-driving taxi company, had just started testing in and around the city. So as a futurist, I thought, oh, I've got to jump onto this gig. So I emailed Waymo and I got accepted as a test rider. Now, I downloaded the Waymo app, and yes, booked in my trip, and I wanted to go to the farmers market in Nashville because my little boy had said to me, "I have to get Nashville hot sauce." So I thought a farmers market would be a good place to go and do that. So I ordered the a taxi, much the way you order an Uber. And I tell you what, Graham, from the moment I saw the Waymo approaching me, I became giddy with excitement until I've been
No,
waiting
I
for.
can. You're definitely a future tech geek. I mean, we both are, but I mean, you are next level, and I'm sure you were like a little kid just waiting to
I
jump
was
in.
a kid in a candy store. I've been waiting for 10 years for this moment. And the car arrives, there's no driver. I decide, rather than get into the back seat, I jump into the front passenger seat. It welcomes me. We set off, and immediately, Graham, immediately I felt comfortable. I felt safe, and really safe. It was a smooth ride. It was cautious. It was intelligent. It was calm. I found myself relaxing into the experience remarkably quickly. And I'll tell you what, then the real experience, real world, came back really quickly. So we come across, we're driving along, been driving for about 5 minutes, and we come across some roadworks. Okay. And there's fresh asphalt on the road. There are no obvious signs. There's no barriers, no signs saying roadworks. There's just some workmen laying out some fresh asphalt. And suddenly a road worker comes running towards us, going, "No, no, stop, stop." And car screeches to a halt. And we have this standoff. Okay. The road worker's waving his arms, the foreman saying, go that way, turn around. He's trying to get the car to move. The car is having none of it. It's got a destination it's got to take me to. Can't run over the workman. So it stopped waiting, but it's not moving. So, so this now carries on, and the foreman tells me, no, he says, you might as well get out. This car's going nowhere. He starts, using rather fruity language. He was not impressed with this smart car. He was,
I've had occasion to be in cars in America where either a traffic officer or a road workman is sort of shouting to get the traffic going. They don't hold back. I mean, they certainly speak their mind. Eh?
that's for sure. So anyway, we got the standoff. It's Western style, gunslingers, all of that. So I like touch this button that says, speak to an advisor or something, and the specialist comes on. It sort of assesses the situation. We have a good laugh together about this foreman who's gesturing to the car to turn around and that. Anyway, so he takes over the system, turns the Waymo around, gives it a new route, and off we go. And I thought, reflecting on this experience, you know, the car simply couldn't follow the foreman's hand signals. It couldn't contemplate driving on the wrong side of the road into what looked like oncoming traffic in a one-way traffic system. For a human driver, this would not have been a problem. We would have quickly read the situation. We would look at the flow of the traffic. We'd understand the permission being granted, and we would just drive on the wrong side of the road. We'd adapt and we'd drive on, and take 30 seconds, and we'd be off on our journey again. I spent 10 minutes in this, what felt like 10 minutes in this standoff with this road worker while the specialist came on and got the car to move around.
Dean, you don't have any ability to be able to do that yourself, right?
No,
And so
no.
you can't step in and take over the car's controls. It has to be done from Waymo HQ.
Yeah, big signs on the steering wheels, do not touch any of the
Right.
control systems in this car. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a funny story, but I think underneath it, I think for me, it captures one of the biggest leadership questions for AI. A lot long ago, the Waymo specialist's job didn't exist. And at that moment, he was not just a human in the loop in some passive or compliance checking sort of sense. He was still the human in the lead. The machine, astonishingly capable. But when the situation became ambiguous, human intuition, human judgment mattered more. And I think that's the point we need to bring to the AI conversation. I recently come across Julie Sweet. She's the CEO of Accenture, and she speaks about humans in the lead. And I think that's a really important phrase. We're often hearing about humans in the loop, but I think it's actually more about humans in the lead because humans in the lead is about the machine is driving and we're still simply checking, and that's kind of humans in the loop. But humans in the lead means something stronger. It means humans remain responsible for the choices and the consequences and the impact.
Yeah, and Dean, I think that I would add to it. I love that humans in the lead idea, and I would add to that the concept of exception management.
Mm.
Or if you want to use tech terms, I think they call it fuzzy logic at some stages, where you're in an ambiguous situation. There's no clear rule that you could have given. The foreman standing in front of you was asking you to have an exception, drive on the wrong side of the road, to just take a quick detour around the roadworks that they were doing. And the system cannot do that because the amount of coding required to the if this then that logic to just create a tiny little exception is beyond what current technology and AI can do. And so you need humans, not I like it, not humans in the loop, but humans in the lead. And it's kind of humans take the wheel again. But you can't then trust the average person sitting in the car. It now needs to go to some expert specialist, probably located in India somewhere, I would suspect, with Waymo, who jumps in and says, "Yeah, yeah, I can see what's going on. We'll sort this out, no problem." But we've still got to have that entire infrastructure to make sure that something that is supposed to be autonomous actually works. Humans still need it, clearly.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I don't buy the hype around AI replacing humans. It's going to be different, but humans are still going to be needed. This is why I found the Pope's new encyclical magnifica humanitas. So interesting. I think it lands at the right moment in the middle of a leadership conversation around advancing AI or advancing humanity. And the Pope is not saying that technology is bad, he's asking whether technology serves human dignity or does it start to reduce it. And that for me is kind of the central issue that we need to be focusing around the AI debate at the moment. Are we using AI to advance people, or are we using it to engineer people out of the system? Now, Graham, I know you've been thinking about this too. And what do you think the Pope actually said, and why does it matter for leaders?
Well, now I know, Dean, with your Waymo story, why you wanted to do this. So let's just tell the listeners this month we decided not to have an external person come in and interview like we have over the last few months, but we decided to dive into this 200 plus page document that came from the Pope recently and look at it. So now that makes sense. So before we jump into that, Dean, and before I answer your question, I think I'm going to sneak my quiz in here.
I thought you might.
Because when you told me we were going to be talking about the Pope's encyclical, I thought now you're dealing with my specialist topic. In case people don't know, I have studied a number of things. I was lucky enough to build up a technology firm in the 1990s and exit before the crash, and I used some of my payout to go back to varsity and just do something I loved. But it included a bit of theology. So, Dean, you're in my turf now, just for a moment. And the quiz today is about a previous pope. So, the current pope is Pope Leo the 14th. And a lot of people thought that he took that name because popes can choose whatever name they want to, and that he took that name because of the previous Pope Leo the 13th, who was pope from 1878 to 1903. So that was kind of in both you and I, Dean, in the presentations, the keynote presentations that we talk about, both of us love going back to the beginning of the previous century to show people a moment in time, the height of the Industrial Revolution, when just so many things were happening. This was electricity was essentially the, if you like, the new technology, the AI of the day. And that electricity then sparked things from light bulbs to the radio. We then had social changes taking place with women's suffrage beginning to emerge as part of that, and women getting the vote. We had cars and planes and flight. It was just a remarkable time to be alive. Both you and I, Dean, I know we feel it's very similar to the era we're in at the moment. And in that moment, Pope Leo the 13th, previous Pope Leo, brought out an encyclical in 1891 called Rerum Novarum, which was on new things or about the new era. And so here, Dean, I want us to go back in time and to test. I've no idea if you have any knowledge of papal history or not, but I'll give you a multiple choice as we normally do. Which of the following was a key theme of the 1891 papal encyclium called Rerum Novarum on new things? I'll give you four options and you tell me which was one of the key themes. Theme number one: the Pope defended private property and rejected socialism's abolition of ownership. Number two, the Pope believed that workers should have a natural right to form associations, or what we today would call unions. Thirdly, employers must not treat their people as resources or mere instruments of profit. They must treat them with dignity as human beings. Or number four, the state has a special duty of care towards the poor and wage earners because, in the Pope's view, the rich could look after themselves. So I've given you four options, and I'm asking you which of these was the major theme of that encyclical in 1891.
Right. I'm going to take a flyer here, Graham, because you're right. Our papal history is not up to scratch.
Fair enough.
I'm going to go with C. I'm going to go with C.
Let's see. Well, Dean, I've been very kind to you this month because you are correct. But you would have been correct if you had said A or B or C or D. because the answer actually is E, all of the above, right?
All
So
of the above.
there we go. I was very kind. I was very kind to
Oh,
you this month. There were no wrong answers. But isn't that amazing if you think about this is 1891, the Pope was writing. And he was looking at what was happening in the world around him, and he was saying, hang on, hang on, hang on. Uh, uh, this is not just new technology. This is a new social contract that is emerging, right? And therefore, we need to, and the church needs to, take a role in society and say, hey, maybe we need to be changing the way we manage these things. Maybe we need to protect private property a little bit more. That was the one that was interesting. I wondered whether you would see that one as sort of a trick question, because you might have thought that the Pope was going to go full socialist. Certainly not Pope Leo the 13th didn't. But then he was saying, that workers should have the right to form associations to stand up for their rights, that the state should be protecting them because the rich can look after themselves. I love that. But then the one that you went for, what I think was also amazing, that he was saying, you cannot just view workers as resources that are just part of the machine, right? You can't treat workers as part of the machine, this industrial machine. You have to treat them with dignity. Now, I think, Dean, I am slowly getting to answering your question. I think that if people didn't know all of that about Pope Leo the 13th, a century and a half ago, maybe they now had a sense of why this new pope, the current pope, as we speak, has taken the name Leo and picked up that name and said, "Well, I'm going to be in that tradition. I'm going to pick up some of those themes." And then the very first thing he comes out with as a major theological statement is this theological statement about technology, AI in particular, in which he's pretty much saying the same things, that we mustn't treat people as resources that you can just throw away. Technology should work for us. We shouldn't work for technology. That there's dignity in work. Honestly, I'm super impressed. I mean, I know I am a Christian and not a Catholic, but I'm a Christian, so I'm fairly predisposed to what the Pope might say anyway. But I was very impressed with this document, and would recommend that people actually go and read it. Actually, I do think it's a really good document to read through. And honestly, I think the Pope makes some very, very good points about what we should be thinking about and how we should be treating AI.
Elephants in the Boardroom is proudly brought to you by our partners at Achilles. As a leader in sustainable global risk management for businesses and their supply chains, Achilles helps the world's largest companies build and maintain ethical, sustainable, and transparent business practices. While we explore the elephants in the boardroom, Achilles is at the forefront guiding businesses through the risks and the opportunities these grey elephants present. If you're interested in how change impacts your supply chain or ESG strategy, it's worth connecting with Achilles. Visit achilles.com to learn more.
But Dean, this was your suggestion for a topic. You can see how excited I was about it. But what did you see in what the Pope said that kind of made sense to you?
I love that example you've just given and about the previous pope, because in many ways you could say, well, the world's changed a huge amount, and yet there are still central themes that are confronting humanity. Even with all the progress and everything, there are still some really tricky themes that we're confronted by. And my concern, Graham, is if you look over these cycles in history, and we talk about the grey elephants as forces of progress, and progress waits for no person. And if you understand how these forces of progress are coming together, how they're shifting and changing the world, you can therefore influence them. Now, what's worrying me is, as I look at the world around us, is that previous technology, so these junction points, these tipping points that we have in this society every 100 years or so, have typically benefited, well, they always have, yeah, the fire, the wheel, the printing press, yeah, internet. These technologies have pushed humanity forward. We've benefited from them and so on. But we're at a junction point now where that may not be the case. Just because it's happened in the past doesn't mean it's going to play out like that in the future. When I heard about what the Pope was thinking and saying and written down, I thought there's some real leaders need to take note. And maybe if we taken notes 100 years ago, we might not have some of the troubles we're having today. But this is a really important junction in history. And I think for me, the Pope is not saying that AI is bad. I think he's asking, what is the technology for? And I think for me, that's where it connects directly with leadership. And I think the elephant in the boardroom is that we've become so focused on advancing artificial intelligence that we forget to advance human intelligence. We assume progress will automatically improve humanity because that's how it's been with previous technologies. But I don't think we can assume AI will do that automatically. AI will advance whoever or whatever we design it to advance. If we design it to mainly be around cost reduction and coding and automation and creating more billionaires and more trillionaires, that's what it's going to do. But if we design it around judgment, learning, creativity, responsibility, human dignity, I think we have a real chance to do something much bigger. And I've been thinking about AI recently instead of artificial intelligence. I've been thinking about it more around advancing intelligence because I think that puts human capability at the center. It's just a phrase. It's AI becoming advancing intelligence instead of artificial intelligence. But I think language matters in these moments in time.
I think that that's exactly what the Pope was getting at, not to endorse everything that he said. There were a number of key takeaways for me. That the first one kind of echoes back to Leo the 13th, where he said, if this new technology is not advancing human dignity, that was the word that he used. But I think that dignity is the dignity of having purpose in your life. It's the dignity of having a way to make a wage and a way to contribute to society. So having a job. But I think dignity is also about intelligence. It's about using who we are, what we have as human beings in both our intelligence, maybe our emotions, our relationships, and advancing those. And any technology that doesn't help us to advance our humanity surely must be seen as an enemy of humanity, must be seen as something that would be dangerous and damaging to us. And then why would we do that to ourselves? Why would we let that just come into the world unconstrained? So I think that's the first point he's made. The second point he's then making is nothing should be unconstrained in the world. So if something is there as a human common community good, then it should be controlled by the community. Now that might be communist or socialist if you like those labels and think that that label fits. I don't think that's what the Pope's saying, but it doesn't matter. I do think he's right that we would say the same about air and water, and we would say the same about things that are there for the common good, which is why governments provide education and healthcare. Yes, there can be a few of them that are private, but everybody needs to have access to them in some way, and therefore the government must step in. So he's saying that these can't just be left up to rich private individuals to do whatever they like with, and have no constraints. Some constraints are required, and I would absolutely agree with the Pope on that one. And I mean, there's a lot more. It's 280 plus pages, so it's worth getting into. But those really stood out for me. Yeah, I think that we need to take this seriously. I think at least the Pope's asking questions that are worthy of being asked, and
Mm.
we should have some answers before we just say, "No, he's just the Pope. What does he know?"
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, for me, the Pub's question is ultimately a boardroom question. What are we building? What are we building organizations where AI advances human capability? Or are we building systems where machines get smarter while humans get smaller? I'm sure you're seeing the shift as well, Grant. There's a lot of focus around automation and cost saving and so on. That was kind of the knee jerk reaction. But we're seeing the really switched on leaders and organizations started to recognize that, hang on, AI can help us to reimagine what we do. They can help us to really combine human capabilities with incredible, artificial intelligence capabilities, and together the system is stronger, but one's not replacing the other. And I think the organizations that get their strategies around that are going to steal the march on the ones who are just trying to automate what they did at the past. Because you know as well as I do, Graham, as we've looked over history, the organizations, at these sharp transformation periods in history are very different to what they were before. This is an amazing period of reimagination. And if you're not reimagining how you can do things with this new technology, you're missing the power, you're missing the point of it.
I think you're spot on, and that's one of the big messages of the 5T impact model that we've developed, which is just about 5 different ways that AI impacts you. The first is your tasks. If there's 5 Ts, the task is your productivity level. I think everybody's kind of getting that one right. The second is when AI becomes a member of your team, and that can be an agent or an avatar or a model that you use. And I think a lot of people are working on that. But that is unfortunately just where you are taking what your team already does and you are automating each of the bits of that. And so you're optimizing your existing business, which again might be brilliant and it might be worth doing. But that's not really where the power of the technology works itself through your system. You need to then get to the third level, which is at this transversal level, which is about looking at your workflows and saying, can we reimagine them? Not just optimize what we used to do or what we were doing, but now that we have this new technology, can we do things in a different way? And if you do that, the fourth level becomes available, which is transformation. And I think everybody wants transformation, but they don't realize you've got to build this foundation. And the foundation includes good data, it includes reimagining workflows. I heard a great an analogy. I wish I could remember who I heard it from to give them the credit. But they say everybody wants to pilot the AI aeroplane into the future. But they forget that a plane might have two pilots, but it's got 50 ground staff who are refueling, making sure that the plane can get, reverse out of the parking bay, the air traffic controllers. And so you're wanting to fly to a new destination without doing the hard work of building the airport infrastructure. I love that analogy. And so all of that is the first three levels, and then you might get transformation. The fifth T is trust, which I think we are losing rapidly. And I think that that's also part of the Pope's message, is that we can only trust humans. And I think this is one of the most powerful things he said, is that you cannot ever say, the computer made me do it, or the AI said. He said, at very least, we need to be accepting responsibility, that whoever builds the systems needs to take responsibility for them. Whoever buys the systems has to take responsibility for them, and whoever uses the system has ultimate responsibility for what it is used for. And I agree with him 100% about that. And that is kind of it's more than even humans in the lead and humans in the loop. It's like I don't even know. I wish I had a clever. Dean, we have to come up with a clever. Another humans are responsible, kind of, but there must be an L in there somewhere that we can use. Humans on the lamb or something. I don't know, but humans are responsible, and we can never give up that responsibility. I agree with him completely.
If I go back to my Waymo example, the foreman took responsibility. He
Mm.
ran out. I mean, and then that's it. Just that act in itself was really interesting. He ran out and ran towards the car, knowing the car would stop.
I was just
Yeah,
going to say he's obviously done that before, and he's probably cursing as he sees it coming. Right? He knows. He
yeah,
knows.
and they've obviously briefed them. They know how to stop it if it's going to do these crazy things and so on. But he took the lead and he stayed there. He didn't like kind of just run out and then move off or whatever. Yeah, he directed, he channeled the outcome. Yeah, I knew I could. Yeah, well, actually, I didn't know at the time, but I looked around on the car's dashboard and there's a button that says speak to someone to help you. So I pushed that button. That person came online. They assessed the situation. They called in a specialist. Humans drove that system. For me, the annoyance is this word artificial. Yes, it's artificial intelligence and it's incredible, but the language is important. And I really think we need to start talking about how we advance intelligence. And then everything the Pope's been saying starts to come to the forefront. It starts to make a lot more sense. Because if we just focus on the artificial side of things, I'm worried about the future that I'm seeing. But if we think about how humans, machines interact in that kind of Waymo standoff situation experience I had, there is an outcome. It's a better outcome, and it works. But individually, there are lesser parts of the puzzle.
No, that makes sense to me. And maybe there's just one more thing to add into this conversation, and I think then we've given people a lot to think about. And for me, it maybe even comes from the history of cars. If you've kind of sat in the car of the future, we've been talking at Tomorrow Today. We've been talking about driverless cars for maybe 15 years. I'm really glad that you got to experience one, and I hope I get to experience one soon. But if we go again all the way back to the beginning of the last century again, and we think about what happened with cars, cars were initially thought of as massive annoyance because they were irritating the horses. Within a decade, by the middle of the 19 teens, cars had overtaken the horses. It was clear that cars were the winning technology. But cars were pretty dangerous for quite a long time. But it took a long time for governments around the world to say, well, we'd better have some kind of certification for the drivers, right? And come up with actually being licensed. And the fact that then different countries said you can't drive this car if you are not 16 or 18. So there were age limits. And it's for me, there's fascinating analogies as I'm thinking about this here. Should we have age limits on when people can be on social media and on smartphones and on AI? Maybe. Maybe you can't drive as a primary school student. Maybe you shouldn't be able to use AI as a primary school student. Why? We've done it before with a new technology. Then we realized, hang on, we need speed limits, right? There are cars that can be designed to go 600 kilometers an hour. You're not allowed to use them in public. And there's a special track you can go to, and it's called a sport. And some of us love watching it, and every now and again somebody blows up while they're doing it and crashes and burns, and it's a little bit of spectator thing, but not in public, right? You're not allowed to, there's limits required. And then we looked at sustainability around cars. And we said cars are ruining the environment. We need to, make sure we don't have leaded fuel and so on. So maybe you can't use up the water, and you can't have noise pollution. Is another thing cars weren't allowed to do. You have to have silencers on your exhausts, And then finally, it took us till the 1980s to mandate seatbelts. And people were dying, literally dying because of these cars.
Mm.
And for me, Dean, this is an amazing analogy, the sort of history of cars. But we need to realize it took 60, 70 years to kind of get the whole package. And now we're going to have to do the same thing with driverless cars. I think we're in that same space with AI. New technology, lots of promise, but also lots of danger. And we're going to have to build these guardrails, I think.
Absolutely. That brings two things to mind. The first one, you said, it took 60 to 80 years for us to realize about the side effects of the progress, the positive progress of the automobile, of the car. There were indicators. It doesn't, I have an issue with regulation. I have an issue with governments having to come along and put in laws and rules and so on. Some of them make a lot of sense and we need them, but often it's just good common sense. And I want to put it to car manufacturers from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. You guys knew that when a driver hit the pedal in an emergency situation, people were flying through the windscreens. I've not worn a seatbelt doing, say, 20 kilometers an hour and hit the brakes, and you fly into that steering wheel. So I've been traveling in a car at 20 miles an hour and hit the brakes, and you boom into the steering wheel. And I do that at 60 kilometers an hour, 80 kilometers an hour, 100. You're flying through the windscreen. Okay, and manufacturers knew about this. So why did we need to wait for the governments to put laws in place before they started insisting that people wore seatbelts? It's just good common sense. There's a lot of good common sense things that we can see about AI if we put our minds to it. I would say there's a real responsibility for leaders these days not to just wait for the regulation, but to think about how can we advance things so that humanity, society, our customers, our shareholders benefit from it, and not just reap the rewards of this technology without thinking about the side effects. Each progress has positive benefits, it has side effects. And for a long time, I think we've become addicted. So let's take plastic. Graham, you and I talk about plastic as a pollutant, but plastic is also a wonder material. It's lighter, it's more durable, it's lighter than glass, it's more durable. It can help us with medication and hygiene and all of these things. But the side effect, it pollutes. And we've known about this for a long time, but we become addicted to this progress. So we ignore it, we push it to the corner. And eventually it becomes such a big problem, it becomes this gray elephant. It becomes this force of progress, this negative side effects. New technology comes in, finds solutions for it, or there's a tipping point where society can't accept it anymore. I don't think we have to wait there for that with AI. I don't think we have to wait 80 years for the regulations to come in, the 60 years or whatever, however long it takes. We can pinpoint these things pretty quickly. And I really think leaders need to start thinking about artificial intelligence and advancing intelligence. How are we advancing humanity's intelligence? And I think if you start thinking about it like that way, then you can identify the problems. You can come up with solutions with them quickly. If we think about artificial, we're always going to blame the machine. It was the machine, it wasn't us. And like you said earlier, Graham, that's not an excuse. It's the Pope is saying to us, that's no longer an excuse.
Love that takeaway, Dean, that it's about advancing our intelligence together as humans and machines together. My takeaway from this conversation is that if you as a leader are only focused on maximizing your profit for the next 12 to 18 months, well, then you can chase the hope and hype that Silicon Valley is going. I think it's a bubble, maybe a conversation for another day. But if you have got a slightly longer term view than that, and by the way, if that's who you are, Dean and I at Tomorrow Today Strategy Group, we're not your people, right? We're not going to help you maximize your profits and then crash and burn 2 years later after you've retired. If you have a view that what we do really matters and how we implement this technology gift that we've been given is important to build a better world so that we as humans can live better lives. Well, then we need to take this conversation seriously. We've got a wonderful new technology that can be used for good and bad. And if we use it for good, it will become a competitive advantage as soon as everybody realizes how bad it can be. Those who have used and are using it for good will absolutely reap the rewards of doing that. And that might be a decision that you and your leadership team need to strategically take. That you are going to use this technology for good and get the human dignity and a better planet as a result. So, Dean, another wonderful conversation, another month. We're halfway through the year. What a year it is. It feels like it's been a decade already, 2026. But thank you to everybody for joining us. As always, thank you to our sponsors, Achilles, for sponsoring these conversations, these insights into the future. If you're looking for a partner to help you think through supply chains and logistics and the way things move around this world that is changing, and technologies that can help you to do that more efficiently and better, please make sure that you check out what Achilles do and have a conversation with them. But from us for this month, thank you for joining us in the boardroom. Thank you for looking in the corners at the elephants that are standing staring back at us. And we'll see you next month again for another conversation and a really exciting interview that we've got lined up.
Thanks, everyone.
Next time on Elephants in the Boardroom.
That stuck with me, which is becoming somebody that can draw the leadership position or status not through formal power, but through informal power. And informal power here would mean that you are accepted as somebody that is willing and able to give and contribute 2 cents, but somebody that's got the humility to know that the people around you for the most part might be smarter than you are. Those are people that can do things better, faster, and wiser in some cases.